Yep.
So with us is Sarina Dupont. Sarina Dupont joined the company. When did you join the company?
It's been almost 4 years.
I remember when we had breakfast. I interviewed Sarina.
Yes.
At a breakfast restaurant down south of Santa Cruz. It was 4 years. Wow.
It's almost 4 years, I know. Time flies.
And Sarina, why don't you tell everybody some of the things you focus on in the products in product management?
Yes, hi. So I'm Sarina Dupont, Senior Product Manager here at Embarcadero Technologies. And it's great to be on today and answer your questions and be able to talk about the product a little bit more. You've probably attended some of the webinars I've done, and the webinars I've done and the blog posts I focus on, they tend to be pretty closely tied to the areas of the product that I focus on. Not exclusively, but they're pretty closely tied to them. One of them is user experience and app development around that. So it's the UI styles, so for example, the native styles for iOS, Android, Windows, and Mac, and FireUI, building applications for the different devices, VCL styles, also around FireMonkey in general. So FireMonkey features that go into the product. So for example, the different controls, extending components, etc. around FireMonkey. So there's different, the product management team is really broken up into different areas, but that doesn't mean that we exclusively focus on those different areas. There's a lot of collaboration across, but I focus on the FireMonkey functionality, UI functionality, install, and then some of the database features as well. So there's a lot of collaboration and kind of crossover amongst the team. But those are FireMonkey styles, install, and I'm probably forgetting something else. But there are a lot of different areas around of the product I focus on. One of the areas on the database side that I've taken, a real interest in and also done a lot of blog posts on has been BAS. So I've really focused a lot on BAS and REST. I really like REST. I really like BAS. And I think that, there's a lot of different features within that framework that I've tried to highlight. And one of the things I like to do is really supplement and extend what we have in the documentation with topics. So I'm always open for feedback on topics you'd like to see. And I keep getting great messages through my Twitter at Sarina Dupont. People sent me messages saying, can you cover this? Can you cover that? You can also, of course, email me. But that's something I always look forward to, as well as hearing from customers what you like to see in the product, what you'd like to see in future versions, but also what you'd like me to cover in webinars, blog posts, etc., because it's really something that's helpful. Usually I come up with the topics myself. I look at kind of what the questions are either online, of course, on our new community site at community.embarcadero.com. I've tried to be really active on there and answer questions, and then build out blog content around that, webinar content, etc. But a lot of times it's really focusing on the key features that I've been involved in with the product, and then focusing on building out content for that.
I think another thing, first I'll say BAS is that Sarina's talking about, most people may know, some may not, Backend as a service, not Bass the fish or Bass the guitar.
It has nothing to do with
Bass,
playing music or going fishing, but it has all to do with cloud. Backend as a service, so we have integration for Convey and Parse, and of course we also have support for App42, and then we have that's built, the Bass framework sits on top of our REST framework, so we have a whole set of REST components. We have a tool called the REST debugger that makes it really easy for you to query REST APIs and work with REST APIs. You can even copy a fully connected setup via the copy components functionality in the REST debugger. So it's a really great functionality. It's a really great feature set that you can use to build your applications, and that works across, of course, VCL and FireMonkey.
Yep. I think another thing, as you look at the FireUI and the work you're doing with the FireMonkey team and all of that, you also really look at what is Apple saying you must do. You look at the Apple user interface guidelines, the Android guidelines, and so on, and make sure that what the team is doing will give our customers successful, or hopefully a successful acceptance into the stores and in the community, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. UI and UX and application design is something I've always had a really big interest in. In my prior job, before coming to Embarcadero, I worked with graphic software in both 3D and 2D animation and also illustration. And I've been a long time graphic software user myself as well. So I think aesthetics, mobile application aesthetics and application aesthetics in general have a big impact, especially nowadays where users are looking for these next-gen experiences. it's really important to build applications that look nice and, of course, are very responsive. But I think customers nowadays and end users in general have a really high expectation for a great user experience. And you can have apps that basically have the same functionality, but the one that looks better usually will be the one that will win. And so it's really important to build apps that look nice. But then, of course, on the mobile side, we also have the mobile UI guidelines. So those are really especially important on iOS. They're also important on Android. But on iOS, there really are some pretty strong guidelines to adhere to. And I've done several different webinars, and you can find them on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/EmbarcaderoTechNet if you search for my UI guideline webinars, where you can find out more about how to build apps that adhere to guidelines across iOS and Android. And of course, one of the things that we did in XC7 is make that a lot easier for our users, in the sense that we built in behavior services. So behavior services have some pre-built functionality across the different platforms for the controls. So they basically add additional intelligence, platform-specific intelligence, so to speak, to the controls. So a good example of that would be, for example, the tab control, right? Standard tab control guidelines would say that on iOS, the tab has to be aligned to the bottom with icons and glyphs, and on Android has to be aligned to the top with text. And so we have that built in for you automatically. And that's the case for many different controls. They have a behavior services feature that you can toggle, and you can ensure that you're adhering to the guidelines. And then, of course, using good design practices like alignments, margins, etc., to ensure that your controls are not overlapping, etc. And so that's something that, we further or we extended with XC7 with the introduction of FireUI, of course, which is our multi-device design framework. And you're able to easily design applications that not only look right, but also behave right and lay out properly across all the different targets. And so using alignments and anchors is, of course, a really good approach, but then you can also fine-tune it for each of the views. So the views are related to target devices. So, for example, we have a 5-inch view, we have a 4-inch view on Android, 7-inch, 9-inch, and then we have iPhone, iPad, etc. And generally speaking, and I wanted to provide some tips here because that's something I've focused on a lot as well, is the best practices around FireUI. And I've written a frequently asked questions document that kind of highlights the key things that you should look at. So in general, if you just have your master form, you built your application, you can deploy that to all the supported platforms, iOS, Android, Windows, and Mac. But let's say you want to do something different on iOS than Android. You just create a single view. If you wanted to just have a different message on, for example, on iOS, on all your iOS devices, iPhone, iPad, etc., you would just create one iOS view, one Android view. Now, if you want to do something specific, which in a lot of cases you would want to, for example, if you have a universal app, so to speak, an app that's designed to run on both iPhone and iPad, you're going to want to probably have more UI controls on your iPad application than your iPhone application. And actually for Delphi Week, this week I created a blog post on that with a sample that you can download that shows you how to basically set the visibility of some of the controls to true or false. So for example, you could have additional panels, list boxes, etc. on a tablet form factor than you would have on a phone form factor. And you can just toggle that by changing the visibility. And if you're creating a view for a tablet, for example, 10-inch, and then for a phone, for example, 4-inch, then any of the target devices that you run that application on, it will query the system to figure out what's the closest resolution and then load the view accordingly. So if you then deploy it to a phone and the phone is around a 4-inch view, it will load the phone application. And then if you deploy it to, let's say, an Nexus 10, it would load the tablet layout that you had designed.
And is that the HR management?
Yeah, that's the HR Manager demo. It's a demo that I created around the XC7 release, and I featured in several webinars, and I'd gotten some requests from users on it, and actually I updated it with some more additional sample data. Originally I had used just some static info by updating the labels with some text, but I wanted to use some actual data, so what I did is I created a simple XML file with some sample data, loaded it into a FDMEM table, and saved it out, and I'm including that in the application. And it's just an example. It shows you how to do those live bindings, how to easily, for example, organize your controls so that it's easy to figure out which ones you want on the tablet and which ones you don't. So, for example, if you're working with a lot of different UI controls, it makes a lot of sense to name them in a fashion that it makes it really easy for you to know which ones you want to show and hide. So, for example, in my case, I named the list box, the panel, the admin panel for the HR app, tablet HR list. So I know I want to hide them, set the visibility to false on all views except tablet views.
Okay, good idea.
And I've brought up both your blog and now I put those in the chat window. I've brought up your blog post about the HR example and want to make sure everybody knows there's the link to the CodeRage webinar and also your skill sprint session links are there. And if everybody scrolls down to the bottom, there's then a link to Code Central to grab the source code for the HR project.
Yes, that's true. Thanks for doing that. Great.
Yep. And then, the other thing I want to mention, you've got the link there, but Jim also did a FireUI session, and Darren Kozinski, who works on FireMonkey, did a What's New in FireMonkey session. So if you look in the Delphi track or Object Pascal track for those 3 sessions, when you're looking at and thinking about the multi-device designer, FireUI, T-Multiview component, and so on, watch those 3 sessions. I think, Jim, you kick it off, then Sarina goes into multi-view and other things. And then Darren talks some about the underpinnings, the lower, how it's actually implemented underneath. At least I think he was talking about that there's this whole list of sort of form factors, types that they want to support. But right now I think we've implemented 3 or 4 of those. He went into the FireUI source code in the RTL, and there's some placeholders there for more work to come as well. Yeah. Let's see. Garnet saying help. Examples. I find myself searching multiple places to find documents on BAS and new components. Well, Sarina's blog, I mean, you also collected a lot of the BAS components, right?
If you go to blogs.embarcadero.com/Sarina Dupont, on the top left-hand side, there is a navigation for my blog, and I've created some categories. And the top menu item should be BAS tutorials, and I've tried to update that list with all my BAS related tutorials. 1 or 2 of them might be missing, but actually I think that list is pretty complete.
Yeah, I've got it up here, and I'm showing it now. So there's her. That's on the older WordPress blog. But then the first one, if I click on BAS tutorials, there you'll find all of those.
And the bottom, I think the first entry in that category, actually, if you were to scroll down on that list, I believe, is kind of an overview with links to all the different tutorials.
To get you started quickly.
To get you started, yes. So BAS is a powerful feature set in the sense that you have cloud storage, push notification, user management, etc. And you can either use Kinvey, Parse, or App42 as the concept of a provider. So there's a T-Kinvey provider component, for example, that you can connect to T-Backend user, T-Backend push, T-Backend storage, etc. So it allows you to store data in the cloud. It allows you to upload files such as images, send push notifications to users, etc. And I actually did a webinar, I think back in October on this, where I highlighted how you can use the Internet of Things and devices from the Internet of Things, for example, connected devices like a heart rate monitor, and you can use that to build a medical application. So in this case, I showed you how to sign up a user, create a user account, set a heart rate threshold, store all that data in the cloud, and then send a push notification to the admin of the application. For example, it could be a personal trainer, medical professional, etc., to get a push notification once the patient's heart rate or the user's heart rate exceeds a certain predefined threshold that you've set. And that was all handled via BAS.
Yeah, that was well, you've done so many. I think the thing is, one of the things to answer, there was a question came through, there's all these different things. If you go to the YouTube channel for Embarcadero TechNet, there's playlists for all these different topic areas. And I think what I'll do is some of those are in skill sprints and CodeRage, but I think I'll add some additional topic areas like you've done in your blog, BAS, and maybe Internet of Things, and put, because we can cross-link in YouTube with these playlists to make sure those are all there. The other thing I wanted, somebody was asking about tutorials and help and so on, and I brought up the Doc Wiki. Masahiro was just here, Raisan was here, and we've got the mobile tutorials. Let me go with this one, which is fine. It's the same. There's a whole bunch of tutorials starting from setting up your environment all the way through, and Jim and Sarina have also done on the Start Here page. There's a lot of these quick little tutorial videos and even links that'll take you to the samples that ship with the product, right? Because we have videos to get you started, but then the samples are also right there with the product.
Yeah, we have a set of code snippets, and they're really designed to be small examples that just highlight a specific feature. And then we have more full-featured demos under the samples folder. And we really try to make sure that those samples also have alignments, anchor set, follow the UI guidelines, etc., to really make it easy for you to see and also learn how to build your app that adheres to the guidelines. And that's also true, of course, for all the FireUI multi-device templates that are a part of the multi-device application wizard and the IDE.
So I've also put on in the Q&A log, and I'll get in the chat window, these mobile tutorials here. The other one I want to highlight is the doc team has taken all the mobile tutorials, and at least for English language, there's a PDF that has all of the tutorials in one big PDF as an ebook, and you can have that with you. You can print it out and make bind it yourself or whatever. So there's lots of ways to find things, and I usually end up in the doc wiki as a good part of it. Let's see, the source for the heart rate BAS sample app has never been released, ?
No, it's actually up. It's on, if you go to each of the YouTube videos,
okay,
it's in the description. So the description on the YouTube videos was updated. I apologize for releasing that a little later than I had originally planned, but they were added, I think, about a month or so ago. So if you go to the YouTube channel and you look for CodeRage 9 Convey, or the Convey webinars for both C++ and Delphi, the sample files are there.
Okay, so let me go ahead, Jim. I'll do this. Let me go.
Hello.
I'm not going to do that one. Sorry, I clicked on the wrong link there.
All right, so while David's doing that, I have a question for you. Besides the features you listed earlier, what's your favorite language feature?
Ooh, that's a tough one. What's my favorite language feature? I think the parallel library work that we've done has just been great. The ability to separate, the UI from the application logic, in the sense that you can do things in the background with background threads.
Right.
I think it's incredible. It's an incredible feature, and it's also very important, especially on mobile.
Yeah, where responsiveness.
Responsiveness is key. You don't want to lock up somebody's user interface, because the first thing the user is going to think about is, oh, the app's crashing, or the app is frozen up. What's going on? And so that is really an excellent feature to use. And I've tried to highlight that more. Actually, also in that Convey webinar, I actually was using, I think, a T-task in order to run it in a background thread for while you're gathering the heart rate data, because I was also updating the chart. I was using a T-chart and was updating that. I think I used a timer, I think, every second or so.
Yeah, that's really important. Exactly.
So here on the CodeRage page in the Object Pascal track, it's creating highly connected apps with Bluetooth and Convey.
Yes.
And then if I go and watch the replay, I'll hit pause here.
Thank you for joining me.
Okay. So when I go to
Sarina?
That's my voice.
I go to the show more, so that's your voice. So there you go. Again, if you go there, and I'll put that in the chat window, that's the YouTube video for the BAS, and also for the heart rate. The question from Helga. There's also is there a C++ version as well, right?
Yes, there is. If you were to search, and maybe David can bring this up too, but if you were to search for the C++ webinar that I did, and that was actually shown as part of the CodeRage C++ track, there is a C++ version as well.
Yep. So I'm just trying to figure out how to copy links and paste them. There's the Object Pascal one. That's going in for Helga, and then I'll go to the C++ track. Go ahead, Jim. Sorry, I'm sure I'm creating havoc over here, as usual.
How do you see the world for developers changing with the Internet of Things? What do you see being the big impact of that, and what are some things we need to think about differently in that regard?
I think it's not just an industry trend, but it's really something that developers will have to consider as they're building out these connected experiences. And I think it's thinking about devices and gadgets in a way that we haven't before. Right? In the past, gadgets that you would use really weren't tied into, let's say, your phone or your home experience. And when developers, I think, are thinking about building apps, it's not just about extending existing applications, but also tying them into these new IoT gadgets. So, for example, let's say you're building a home application for use in somebody's home. You would want to build an application, for example, that can not only adjust your temperature, for example, using a Nest thermostat, but can also turn on the lights in your home, etc. So building a fully connected experience where the user can automate all the different parts. And the same is also true in enterprise. For example, in manufacturing, being able to weigh the items on a freighter, for example, being able to forecast the how the lights are switching with traffic lights, etc. It's really about building connected experiences. And as gadgets become more and more commonplace and connected, everybody's connected to the internet nowadays in almost all countries. That market is just growing and exploding when you're thinking about the stats and how quickly, from year to year, how it doubles, quadruples, multiplies tenfold, etc. Building connected apps, and whether that's extending your existing applications to mobile or gadgets, or building new applications for new experiences, it's really something for developers to consider.
Yeah, I think, like you're saying, the highly connectiveness we've gone beyond, with smartphones, we've kind of tipped. It's not just about being connected, it's about being highly connected now. And we're connected in multiple ways, multiple devices, multiple gadgets, multiple places. And yeah, it's interesting. Because at first I was like, yeah, it's kind of a buzzword, but I'm really starting to see that it's a trend that we're definitely happening and we're in the middle of right now.
And I think with everything, when I think back when I got my first smartphone, just looking at how the browser operated on that, right? And how back then the browser functionality on those smartphones was really not that good. It was hard to render web pages, etc. It was slow. Then I had, for example, the iPhone, and the first iPhone. I was really amazed at just how quickly it was able to render web pages, content, etc. And we look back 5 years or 6 years now to now, it's incredible, right? Everybody's out there using smartphones for the most part. They're pretty readily available. The cost has gone down a lot, and I think that's really a big part as well, looking at adoption in the market around the world. When smartphones were first introduced, they were quite expensive. Now you can buy them with prepaid plans, you can buy them with regular cell phone contracts, etc. The barrier to entry has really been lowered, and I think that's also helped or furthered the explosion of all the connected gadgets, because so many users, consumers, and as well also enterprise users can take advantage of that.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, the price going down means that not only am I going to have a smartphone, but my kids are going to have a smartphone. And so then there's all of a sudden concerns, not only am I sharing my work stuff on being connected for work purposes, but also for family purposes. And then with gadgets in my home, for home, automating my house. And so the user's expectations are going way up for what they expect to be able to do with these connected devices.
That's so true. And you're thinking about the next generation. I can just imagine in 10 years where we are, where we're going to be. It's going to be incredible compared to 10 years ago from now. Just what has happened in the last 10 years in regards to technology innovation, I think, has been pretty incredible. Now smartphones are getting smaller with more storage, with more features. They're more powerful in many ways than even regular desktop computers were just, so many years ago. So it's really exciting to see the trends continue and to see how phones extend, how that experience extends from smartphones, tablets, etc., to these additional devices.
We also see it in some devices. Some of these smaller Bluetooth LE devices that don't have standard interfaces. One of the ways that you then get at the data, thinking maybe iHealth Labs, my pulse oximeter, it will send it through your smartphone up to the cloud, and then they give you REST APIs so that you can go pull the data down and do things with it. So there's lots of different ways to get to devices, as you mentioned, whether they're connected or direct through low-level Bluetooth LE and the work that we're doing with a lot of these different manufacturers. But I think, and I really love that CodeRage session you did both in Object Pascal and C++ track, because it really did say it well. It brought it all together. You had devices, you had your apps, you had the back-end services, and everything in between, to show how, as developers, we can bring it all together. That was really cool.
Well, thank you. I think that's an important part also, working in product management, is you have to always look at the big picture of how the technologies come together, right? It's a big part of not just looking at the technologies, they're not really designed to all just be standalone features, right? Every application pulls in different technologies, middleware, cloud services, location sensors, different services, sensors, etc. That's all part of many different applications. So it's important to look at how the technologies all come together. And I think, that webinar was a good example of how you can bring the different technologies together into an application that can be used by an end user, but also by, for example, an administrator. So kind of looking at the two different aspects of how cloud, sensor services, Bluetooth devices, how that all comes together into one app or multiple applications.
And not only did you do those sessions in CodeRage for both languages, you're also doing explorations into this whole health, medical, fitness area. I mean, we have all these fitness bands and other things. But you did a blog post about building medical terms, healthcare application as well. I think it was back in December. As we keep saying, we keep looking at how else can we provide some knowledge for developers who want to build or need to build these kind of applications in those industries, right?
Yeah, and I think that's really another good example of how powerful our REST framework is, right? The REST framework ultimately has the ability to query different web services using the REST APIs. And like you mentioned, at some devices you can get the data from some of the devices via Bluetooth LE, some of them via REST API. So the data gets stored in the cloud, you can query it and then display it in your application using a REST API. And the example I did was a demo that showed you how to use the SNOMED medical terms dictionary that is heavily used in medical applications, and how to basically implement that in your application very easily using features such as live bindings, or REST components, etc.
We're here in Santa Cruz County, so there was also the Spitcast. It was the surf spot.
Yes.
We all did REST-based interfaces and application blogs last year. JT did because he surfs. And then we live in this whole surf area, and our conference rooms are named after famous surf spots here in Santa Cruz County.
Whenever I'm traveling around the world, I'll do a demo with the REST API from the Spitcast because it's a simple API, easy to use, and you don't have to go through all the authentication stuff. But also I can make a joke about how the company's based out of California, and everybody there surfs, so of course you have to have a REST API for surfing if you're out of California.
Yeah, that demo is a great example because, as you mentioned, it's a really simple REST API example. It doesn't require any level of authentication, whether it's OAuth 1 or 2. It doesn't require any of that. It's just a basic example, but it shows you how to, for example, leverage the search functionality in a list view to search for a surf spot, and then it gives you longitude and latitude, displays that on a map using the web browser. So it again pulls in different technologies, all hooked into the data source being the REST APIs.
Mm-hmm.
I think another thing that you did and demonstrated and also documented for everybody in working with the FireMonkey team, making it easy with T-List View. Just turn on a checkbox, you get the search at the top. Added, and I forget if it was XE6 or XE7, the pull to refresh property.
Yes, I forget which release we put that into, but yes, that's also available, pull to refresh. And so, for example, on iOS, you see the spinning indicators. You pull down the list. On Android, you see the glow effect. So that's another example of using functionality that end users will expect on those platforms.
What I like about the multi-view, to be able to swipe in from the left and the right to bring the drawer out.
That's something I showed in the HR Manager demo as well. So you have, for example, the team multi-view component is a component. It's basically a container component. You can parent any component to it. You can put a list view in it, align it to the client, for example, populate it with data. And in that example, I just had some sample data that I created that shows employee names. And then you use, for example, the Life Bindings Designer, and you can bind your T-List view into your data source. You can bind the job title, the prior job information, etc., into it in your application. You can have that all synchronized. And then if you run it on a tablet in landscape mode, it's shown as a docked panel. And if you run it on a phone, you can swipe it in. You can show the little hamburger icon, the 3-line icon to click and display the list as well. So there's really a lot of great functionality that uses, again, our behavior services. So we have some platform logic built right into it, how we want that to behave out of the box on iOS and Android, for example. And then, of course, if you wanted to change that, you can fully customize that. So that team multi-view component has many different properties that you can customize. You can overwrite default behavior, or again, you could also access the source code and extend that for your purposes.
Yeah, I put in the chat window, I put the link to the doc wiki for the tutorial for Team Multiview Is that the official name, the hamburger, that little 3-line thing?
No, I've seen it referred to as that. We call it usually the detail icon because it brings up the brings up additional menu items. It's just I like to refer to it as that when I don't show an actual visual sometimes, because it seems to be that people kind of know it's a 3-line, horizontal line icons. Yeah, so it can be really anything you want it to be. You can use any type of icon for that, but that's the one that people seem to be most familiar with.
So drawer mode, popover mode, and then platform dependent behavior mode. Yeah.
Yeah, we have the docked panel.
And custom mode.
And custom mode, exactly. Yeah. And the default ones are really the slide-in view, or you can invoke it by clicking the button, and then, of course, the docked panel mode as well.
So is there... does Apple say that the panel should be on the left or right? Is that one of their user interface must-have, or they'll reject your app? Or
it's not in that particular case. I don't think it's a must-have, but it's pretty standard to have it on the left side. So one of the things I would say in general, even if your app doesn't get rejected, it still makes sense to follow the standard guidelines. And one good example is, for example, if you looked at the mail application on your iPad, right, it would show the left-hand side is where you select your emails, and then you click on one, and the right-hand side is where you see the main view, and that's pretty much just the standard. You would have the right-hand side is usually dedicated for the detail of your application, and the left would be the master in that case, which would be your multi-view panel.
Yeah, I know you always guide me. You say, look at these apps that Apple ships themselves. Mm-hmm. Sometimes maybe they violate it. I know there are other platform vendors that sometimes have apps that violate their own standards, but it's pretty good. You should feel pretty comfortable, for example, putting something in the store if you follow what Apple is doing as they move forward.
Yeah, and I think one of the important parts of that too is not reinventing the wheel in regards to how people interact with apps, right? For example, if you have multiple screens, use gestures to swipe from left to the right to be able to allow users to navigate. Generally, an app shouldn't require an entire tutorial, right? So you see, for example, applications today where you have to sign up for something. For example, you have to sign up for an account to be able to use it. Those applications usually will use something like our tab control with the dots at the bottom. So you see like 3 or 4 dots to indicate you're on screen 1, screen 2, screen 3, for example, to give you a visual cue of the screen you're on. But they're really designed to be quick little images with some instructions. For example, sign up, enter your payment information, purchase, just as an example of a payments application or e-commerce application. It's really designed to make it easy for users because, again, the form factor is smaller. You want to build an application, for example, if it's a form that uses a lot of user input, user swipe up push up the keyboard, right? Move up the keyboard automatically so it's not overlapping with the controls, making it easy for users to navigate between different input fields. And I think we've done a really good job at providing a variety of demos that show you how to implement that functionality in your application.
Yeah. And we had, as you saw as you were walking in, Dave Wilhelm, Mike Devry, and Arison were here, and we did talk about some of the things that Apple does to us sometimes as users as well as development tools vendors that we are. And I've got on the screen your blog post. Actually, it was from a while back, but you've been updating it as well because of different... You okay, Jim? Yeah. He's good. Because of feedback from customers, again, the iOS 8.1.3 app deployment change that took place, right?
Yes. So that's one thing I try to be pretty on top of is any changes that we should document or talk about, make sure our customers are aware of them. And this is an example. We had step A and B, and then we got feedback and we provided step C, and I try to tweak the information as much as possible to make it easy for our users to follow the steps. So I'm a big fan of screenshots and annotating screenshots, using arrows, using text, etc., to make it so that it's easy to follow.
Yep, and I know because I was around. Sarina was over there with R&D, and we had our devices with 8.1.3 on it. I first had 8.1.2, but I said, okay, I'll put on my iPhone 6 so that I could test the steps as well. With 8.1.3, you were here going back and forth with R&D. It was great. You're really in with the R&D engineers.
Yes, that's something I really enjoy doing is working with R&D. I think we have an excellent team, not just here in Scotts Valley, but around the globe of very talented, very intelligent, and motivated individuals who are working on the product tirelessly. A lot of work goes into our releases. A lot of work goes into putting out great quality product with the features that our customers want and need. And so I'm really happy to be working with such a great crew. And the same is also true, of course, for Jim and David here. They really are. David, I know I wonder sometimes when David sleeps, because he's here a lot and he does a really great job. He's always so helpful. His door is always open, and
it's just fun. Well, I told you, remember when I interviewed you at that breakfast, I was very clear. I said there were two things I said. Number one, I probably said too many things. This is a great place to work. It's just so much fun. We get to do all this cool stuff and interact with all these great engineers, number one. Number two, I said, if you really dig in and you learn and you write and you do all that stuff, there's all these resources to help and to collaborate together. And number three, I said I would do absolutely anything and everything to help you, including point you in the right direction. So eventually you're going to wear me out, though, because you're doing so much. But I think it's that we talked earlier about with Dave and Mike and Araison about that collaboration between engineering and product management, or did Dave talk about it as we all go in the room and we fight a lot and throw and then whoever survives and makes it out gets to decide what's in the next product? It really is a collaborative process.
Yes, it is, and I think that that's an important part in product management too. Is you look at the feedback we get from, of course, our surveys. So I'm always very happy that we have great customers like yourselves who are on the phone today or on the webinar today that participate in the surveys, because that's really great data for us, right? When we're looking at how our customers are using the current product, what they're looking forward to, and future products, participation in surveys is something that we greatly appreciate. Plus, of course, all your great feedback on the forums, Facebook, Twitter, the community site, etc. And then we take that and we work with R&D, and of course our feedback we get from sales. But there are many different avenues that we look at when we look at what features we're going to put into a product. But working closely with R&D is a very important part of that, of course, because when you work with engineers, you want to make sure that they can implement the features in the time frame you're looking at. That's something that they think is feasible, etc. And we have a lot of great engineers here that have been with the company for a long time, that have a lot of great input and great feedback for product management. So I think that's it's something that works very well here, the collaboration between PM and R&D.
Karen was asking, as we were showing and talking about the 8.1.3 steps, I know engineering's working on a hotfix, but we have to really test to make sure that things like hotfixes and other things work, right?
Yes, we are working on a hotfix for XC7 for this, and we're actively working on that. So if you step A and B or option A and B that I have in my blog post will likely work for you if you don't have a variety of different provisioning profiles and app IDs. So for example, if you've been deploying or want to deploy ad hoc and to the App Store and to your device, you will likely have 3 different provisioning profiles. In that case, you would want to use option C, because you're going to create different entitlement files for each. And that's something that I highlighted in my blog post. Option C also shows you how you can work with build configurations. So for example, you can create a build configuration for ad hoc, one for App Store, and one for debug to the device, and then you just go into your deployment manager and you add your debug entitlement file, your ad hoc entitlement file, your App Store entitlement file. You just keep that in sync. But if you do that, it makes it really easy to build. Just hit build and run and select a target without having to make any more changes to your project. And again, there will be a hotfix for XC7 for this, but in the meantime, if you're running into problems with option A and B, I would recommend going through option C. We've gotten a lot of great feedback from our customers on it, and it seems to be working for everyone. So the other big part about this is, of course, make sure you don't have any carriage return line feeds in it, because that's something that came up.
Don't use Notepad. You had it in. I think you had it in bold font.
In every section, I know. And I also put in a screenshot that shows you how to enable that in the IDE to see if you're using carriage return line feeds, if you have any of them in there. Because sometimes what happens is you think you don't, you're sure you don't, but then you still end up with them somehow. So it's really important if you run into new problems to check that.
Yeah, that's in the entitlement template ios.xml file, and here again is recommended edit it in the IDE don't use Notepad.
And I have some screenshots too, and what you want to see and what you don't want to see when you look at that in the IDE, just to give you a pointer there.
Oh, that's useful. That's bit me a lot of times.
Yeah.
Cross-platform stuff.
Yeah.
No, that's just what I do. We do that with the on Android as well, right? We put the entitlements. We just say load it into the project and make your changes and go. Yeah. The IDE will not do too many terrible things to text files. It works nicely. It works with code and all of that.
Yeah, the IDE is really the tool you should use to edit that rather than using another tool.
Or if you have a programmer's editor. If you're using a programmer's editor, it plays by all the rules.
Something that adheres to the rules rather than more of a general purpose tool.
Yep. No, that's really good, Sarina. I don't know, Jim, other questions? Or out there, other questions? I know there was a couple questions about how do we keep on top of all of this? Do we get all the information we need from the platform vendors? I know Apple puts up documentation. We have all the header files and interfaces, so those are there, and all the builds that we get, even betas with Xcode and things of that kind. Microsoft puts a lot of documentation and SDKs on MSDN. Google is putting up a lot of information with Android. Sometimes we still have to dig. I think the other thing was Dave was saying a couple times, especially Apple seems to spring some things on us. We think that's going to come out with the Apple Watch or a certain release, and then all of a sudden, a new update happens, and we have to scramble a little bit. But we also have a great community. I know Daniel Wolf and some other people were helping because of the time difference. They were pointing to some things, but Sarina really did in the case of this 8.1.3, every of those three different options. It was really good to have it that way versus a simple quick fix that only worked when you had your own Apple account, for example. You weren't in an enterprise or internal system.
That's something, in general, I think with blog posts I mentioned earlier too, if you have a specific topic that you'd like to hear about that you haven't seen covered, you can always send me an email or Jim or David and I know the three of us, and then of course extending it to two other members of the team that you probably well know, like Marco, etc., or JT. You can send us a message. You can send us an email message through Twitter, etc., and let us know what kind of topics you want to see. And I get a lot of great comments on my blog posts with questions, follow-up questions, etc., and I try to do my best to stay on top of that and provide feedback and answers.
The other area is on the community site, the answers area.
Yes.
And I know, Sarina, you're all over it. I try to be all over it.
Yes, community.embarcadero.com. We try to answer a lot of questions on there, and it has a forms section, and of course also the answer module for quick answers on topics. And feel free to use that and put your questions up there. And it's a site that we are on, and we answer questions, but of course also our other community members.
Yep. Yes. So the forms are there. I like the answers module. We also monitor Stack Overflow and others because members of the community can then vote and comment and answer the questions. Sometimes when we can't get to them or it takes us, maybe it pops up during hours where we're doing something else. So it's a great structured way on the answers versus if you want a more free flow conversation about things, you can still ask questions on the forums. Both the news groups on the older system with SHES and NTP support. The Community 3.0 forums is built on top of kunina.org. It's an open source forums project that we're trying. The number one requested thing for them is for Kunina, KUNENA, is NNTP access as well. Just big ups from Richard. Big thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I can knock out applications in days on multiple platforms. Let me know when Visual Studio can do that. Hey, cool.
It's just made Delphi a real robust product. That's good to hear. I agree.
I think so too, and it's great to hear that feedback. Thank you.
Yeah. And again, sometimes we'll just give a pointer to where the resource information is in the videos. Sometimes we have to do a little more exploration. So if you have something much more deeper, I always recommend contact developer support. Yeah.
Yes. And, something I think that, we try to do a really good job and are doing a really good job at is putting out more and more content for our customers. And, with the skill sprints and the webinars, we do weekly skill sprints, I think Tuesday and Thursday, right, David?
Yep.
And Thursday is our FireDAC series, and Tuesday is we cover various Delphi XC7 topics during the Tuesday sessions, and during 6 a.m., 11 a.m., and 5 p.m. Pacific time. So there's 3 different time slots for every session so that you can learn about all the great features that we have in the product, ask questions, etc.
And skill sprints meant to be, we pick a very small topic, technical tip or trick, and hit it. And so that's where those are all. And then on this landing page for developer skill sprints, that list on the right-hand side goes back to the beginning. They're in reverse order. So we started way back in May and have kept going all the way through with members of the team and members of the community, Sarina, managing accounts, storage, Bass, and so on, all the way up until the recent ones. Of course, there's some guy named David I who edits these together and kind of uploads them most of the time. And so what I tell everybody is that the YouTube playlist, when the videos are uploaded, that's always there. And then I send a message to the web team, and they put the links and put the new tags in. So
yeah, I know that was a question that you mentioned came up earlier, is where do I find all this great information? And our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Embarcadero TechNet is really a great place. We try to put in good keywords for each of the videos we put up to make it easier for you to find the content. You just go to that page, you use the search for our channel, and you can search for Bass, you can search for Bluetooth, you can search for VCL, you can search for tethering, FireMonkey, etc., and find lots of great content.
So, Jim, I think it's time to ask Sarina those three questions, right, about Delphi?
Well, we asked earlier. She said,
"Oh, did I miss it? I was over here going all over the internet."
She likes the parallel programming library.
Okay,
which I guess is RTL, not a language feature.
True.
I know it's kind of a splitting hairs there.
Yeah, that's a
favorite component, T Multiview or the Bass components?
No, which favorite component? Let's go with that one.
I think T Multiview is probably the one. Okay. Given how much I love UI and application design, I think T Multiview is the one.
I tweeted T Bluetooth LE component just because I'm that cool devices too. And gadgets guy. Yeah.
The multi-view, I really like the multi-view too. The drawer UI paradigm where you can swipe that drawer out, I love that, and the fact that multi-view makes it that easy to just drop a couple things down and then be done with that. That makes it great.
I know, and the thing I really like about it is that it transforms itself. It's not just a component for one feature like the drawer. It's really many different things built into one component using the platform services and behavior services. So it's a great component.
Yep.
So
sorry, it was probably you were answering that when I was bringing up all these pages and pasting into or I fell asleep over here. Maybe.
No, I know David's been here a lot. But,
that's all right.
But he is our, he's always here doing a great job.
I'm just a cheerleader. I'm like an enabler. I'm a cheerleader.
I know. I read that about in an article about David I once online, and it said, "How can you not, like David I? He's the cheerleader for developers." And I thought that's it's so true. He's here day and night answering questions, creating content, always looking to help. So he's a really great asset.
Except for next week when I'm on vacation.
Yeah, once in a while I think David gets a chance to.
Or when I'm playing Santa Claus.
Yeah.
But no, Sarina, thank you. I can't say last words. Anything else that you'd like to tell the audience today, or this is also going to go on replay and go on YouTube as well? Any advice, guidance, cheerleading?
Keep creating great apps. It's really exciting for me to see what our customers are building out there. And if you have something that, you're working on, you're really excited about, an app you've published in the App Store, send me an email. I'm always happy and excited to hear from our customers. You can send me an email at sarina.dupont@embarcadero.com. You can send me a message via Twitter at Sarina Dupont. And it's really exciting to hear from our customers to see what they're doing. And I really appreciate the great feedback we get on the webinars, etc. as well. So it's much appreciated to get the feedback from our customers.
Oh, I did want to, and maybe you covered this again because I'm over here like doing stupid stuff. JT did blogs on both the new and the old blog system about if you're doing iOS development and you need 64-bit. And it says there's iOS 64 beta at Embarcadero.com.
That's right.
And what you should send. And you and Marco, you're looking at these as they're coming in.
Yes,
right?
we are. So if you look at that page, it has the information that we'd like you to send to iOS 64 beta at Embarcadero.com to get a chance to participate in the beta.
Yeah, and I put that in the chat window so you can see it. I think the other thing, as Sarina mentioned, you're looking through these and you're finding people that are doing really cool mobile apps.
Yes, some really great stuff there. So, it's one of the things I think that's the most gratifying part about being in product management is seeing the ultimate product, right? Seeing what our customers built with the product. And that's something I've always really enjoyed. Being a product manager, you get to see what people built with the products that you put a lot of time and love into. And it's really exciting to see what apps our customers are building and, the work you put into the different parts of the product, whether it's style, it's the framework, etc., and how they're ultimately being utilized by the customer.
Yeah. Well, okay, Sarina, we're almost close to closing time, and we promised everybody we would do CodeMonkey, the video, and Jim talking about the program once more if people didn't see that this morning. And
I tweeted it too. It's so awesome. Yeah. Jim showed that to me. I don't know how long it's been, but he showed that to me a while back, and I was like, we got to get that ready to show it to customers. It's so awesome.
My wife's been telling me that too for quite a while, but it's one of those things that's like, well, I wouldn't do one more thing with it.
Yeah, that's the thing, we all, I think, it's a good trait to have is to try to be a perfectionist, because I find myself in that, and I know David does too, when we always try to have things be perfect, especially when you're working on content and video, etc. But this is a great example where we want to show it to people because it's just so awesome.
So you got to make a component next, CodeMonkey component.
T-Code, okay.
That's right. It automatically syncs to your audio and then gets your lyrics.
Then it will
using voice recognition.
Then it'll compete with T-Smiley. It'll join the pantheon of fabulous components.
Fabulous components.
But Sarina, thank you very much for coming by during Delphi Week. You are the cleanup batter. You are the closer. You're right. You're the Jimi Hendrix of Woodstock, who closed. He was the last player at Woodstock in 1969. So thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you, and I'm going to do a blog post for Delphi Week. I was in the process of writing it before I came in here. So yeah, you should see it soon.
Excellent.
A nice little bit of great information on the product using our FD table component.
Oh, cool.
Using the FireDAC in-memory data table. So I will be up probably in the next hour or so.
Excellent.
Cool.
Looking forward to it.
All right,
Thanks,
thank
Sarina.
you.